Hello, genealogists. This is Craig with Just Genealogy. As part of my never-ending daily videos, this one is going back to beginning genealogy a little bit, but it's probably good for all of us to think about it for a bit. And what I want to talk to you today about is assumptions and how assumptions get in the way of our research. I fall victim to assumptions all the time. Let me describe some of them. I have an ancestor, a great grandfather by the name of Joseph Bealey. And not once did I ever think that he would be in the army. He wasn't that kind of guy. Not once did I think, I found his draft records for World War I. I found his draft records for World War II. No indication of the family of any service. I assumed no military service. Why bother to even look? However, my wife at the time when the Register of Enlistments came out was smarter than I am, and she looked in the Register of Enlistments for Joseph Bealey, and dang if he wasn't there. So in 1907 to 1909, Joseph Bealey was in the 13th U.S. Cavalry, and he actually deserted, got a court-martial, and got a vacation in Kansas for a year, and then was dishonorably discharged. And nobody in the family ever talked about it. He doesn't mention it on either his World War I or World War II draft cards that he has previous military service, but there it is. So I tracked down his court-martial, I tracked down his pardon from the Attorney General, which is, those things are found in Genealogy Bank. That's the only place I've ever found them easily. The court-martial I had to go to the archives to get. But I made the assumption he had no military service. So I made a mistake. He had military service. So let me talk to you for a moment about another assumption. My great-great-grandfather, Benjamin Parrish, lived in Wisconsin, was born in Nova Scotia, although the census does say Norway. Was born in Nova Scotia, came to Wisconsin in about in the 1830s, and I made some assumptions. One, that my father would tell me everybody who was in the Civil War on his side of the family. So he told me about his grandfather, William Franklin Scott, who served from Illinois. He told me about a lot of his collateral Nylandses, like James Nylands that we've talked about before, or William Nylands that actually is the person we've talked about before. So he told me about the Nylands people. He told me about the Scott, but he didn't bother to tell me that his great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, Benjamin Parrish, was actually a corporal for the entire war in a company that was headed up by his wife's brother, Newton Hawes Kingman. Embarrassing moments solved, because I'm writing a book, among the 43 books I'm writing, about the 13th Wisconsin. And I have a picture of Newton Hawes Kingman, and that's what precipitated me heading in that direction. And so I went to the Adjutant General reports for Wisconsin, and I'm going down the list of people in the Adjutant General's report because that's a good beginning point for a state whose compiled military service records are not yet digitized. And there is Benjamin Parrish. And I'm in shock. My great-great-grandfather was in the Union Army for the entire war. So I go and look, and I go to carded medical records, and I have carded medical records for him. I go and look for a pension, which actually I did before I looked at carded medical records, and there's a pension for him. So me, if you know me, you know I'm a guy who is the go-to guy for military records. And for 30 years, I didn't know my own great-grandfather was in the Union Army. Talk about how an assumption can get in the way of what you're doing. And now my third assumption for today. I've talked to you before about Samuel Thomas Scott, who is in the Tennessee militia, serves at the Battle of New Orleans, is wounded at the battle I talked about the other day, the La Ronde Plantation battle, is wounded in the head, actually at the Battle of Chalmette, on the 8th of January, which I haven't talked about yet, but he did, and I should do that soon. I keep telling myself that I'm going to do it soon. And so he, theoretically, according to everybody, according to family lore, according to every published genealogy, according to everything I've ever read, not in records, but read in published genealogy, says that he descends from Thomas and Amy Scott of Bensalem, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who are Quakers. I believe that my assumption that my ancestor Samuel Thomas Scott, my third great-grandfather, descended from Thomas and Amy Scott has gotten me in trouble over the years. Because it dawned on me that Samuel Thomas Scott, living in Davidson County, 6 miles from Nashville, not far from the Hermitage, had many children. Those children are named after his neighbors, which is kind of interesting. But every single one of them was married in the Second Presbyterian Church of Nashville. And the Reverend Hume was the minister for each one of those marriages. Now, Samuel Thomas Scott was born in North Carolina in 1771. You've met him once if you did the genealogy skills test. His War of 1812 pension, it was an invalid pension. When he signs his name, he puts 71 underneath it. Probably to distinguish him from all the other Samuel T. Scotts, I don't know. But he does say in his pension that he's born in North Carolina. Now, I assume that when he says he's born in North Carolina, that's North Carolina as it exists at the time of him filling out his pension, not at the time of his birth. Because at the time of his birth, if he's born in North Carolina, he might be born in Tennessee because he's living in Tennessee. So one has to decide whether a person living in Tennessee who says he's born in North Carolina in 1771 means that he's actually born in North Carolina as it exists in 1815 or Tennessee as it exists in 1815 but was North Carolina in 1771. I'm going to go with he was born in North Carolina. Now, on the assumption side of the descendants from the Quakers, it says that he was born in Pasquotank County, North Carolina. I have examined Pasquotank, North Carolina rather thoroughly over the years, and I can find no connection between Samuel Thomas Scott and Pasquotank, North Carolina. However, I do have a tax list in Anson County, North Carolina that seems appropriate for Sam and his brother William. No other people there but named Scott except Sam and William that I remember. So the assumption that my people were Quakers has gotten me in trouble a lot. And my sense, I've made another assumption that a Presbyterian was not a Quaker first. Now, I have encountered recently people whose families were Quaker, they became Methodist, which is what my expectation is, and then eventually that family becomes Presbyterian, but I don't see any Quakers directly becoming Presbyterians. And if you know of one, let me know. I would love to hear about it. I would expect, though, that they're going to become Methodists. So assumptions get in the way of our research. I avoided researching Benjamin Parrish for 30 years because my expectation was he wasn't a Union soldier, he was a Canadian. Now, a naturalized Canadian in Wisconsin by that time, but still, most people don't serve in the Union Army and will avoid it if they can, more than likely, or maybe not. And then the issue about my great-grandfather being in the Army, who knew? I've got another one. I assumed that my great-grandmother, the guy who married that great-grandfather, had no siblings because I'd never been able to find one. When my grandmother died, there was a little tin can, and in that little tin can there was a picture of my great-grandmother's brother who died in 1913. His name was Mark Aloysius Bealey, and he was in the 7th U.S. Cavalry. And here, another assumption got on the way. I never could find any siblings, so I assumed there weren't any siblings. Assumptions get in the way of your research. So what I want you to think about today is, what is it that I know, and what is it that I have assumed? And have my assumptions gotten in the way of me finding what I should know? In genealogy, you always want to go from what you know, what you can prove. Now, you can make assumptions, but they have to be transient. They can't be things that guide you for the rest of your life. Because once you have an assumption, you want to be able to prove or disprove that assumption. And if you hold on to that assumption for a long time, it may create a problem for you. And that's what I want you to avoid, problems. So this is Craig with another quick video because I'm visiting my granddaughter. And Just Genealogy, where we're making people doing genealogy recognize that genealogist is something entirely different. I forget what the words are. Anyway, I will create another video for tomorrow. Thank you all so very much. Bye.